Imagine this, you're 22 years old. Your father just sold 2 acres of ancestral farmland, land your family has held for generations too. Pay a consultancy office tucked inside a fading strip mall 3 towns away. They promised him certainty. They promised you a future. A student visa to Canada, maybe Australia, maybe the UK. They showed glossy brochures, ivy-covered buildings, libraries that looked like Hogwarts, smiling international students lounging on manicured lawns. They told you this was the golden path. Study for 2 years. Get a work permit. Apply for permanent residency. Bring your family over. Clean, linear. Guaranteed, so you pack your life into 2 suitcases and land at Pearson Airport or Heathrow with borrowed money and borrowed hope. But when you arrive, it's not Hogwarts. It's a single rented room above a pizza shop in an industrial suburb. Your student housing is a mattress on the floor of a basement shared with 6 other people. The rent is $800 a month. The walls sweat. The future already feels smaller. For more than a decade, this wasn't an exception. It was a system. The international student boom wasn't about education. It was about arbitrage. Governments wanted the GDP boost. Universities wanted tuition that's often 3 to 4 times what locals paid. Landlords wanted rent. Everyone made money. Everyone except the students. But then something changed. In 2024 and 2025, the Western world woke up with a hangover. Borders tightened. T slammed down. Rules multiplied. The golden ticket was quietly revoked. What used to be an open secret immigration pipeline disguised as educations suddenly became politically radioactive. Welcome to the end of the era. This isn't just about visas. This is about a business model collapsing in real time. An entire shadow economy strip mall colleges, basement rentals, food delivery labor, tuition cross-subsidies built on the assumption that the flow would never stop. And now the flow is stopping. Canada is capping. Australia is rejecting. The UK is banning dependents. The United States is building walls quietly, bureaucratically, efficiently. And behind every policy announcement is the same realization. What was sold as education became mass migration without consent. Today, we're breaking down the new rules. Not the headlines, not the marketing spin. The mechanics. Why governments are pulling the emergency brake. Why universities are staring at insolvency. Why landlords in college towns are panicking. And why millions of students are realizing to light that the ladder they were promised was never guaranteed. Because this isn't just an immigration story. It's an economic unwind. A correction phase after a decade-long gold rush. And like every correction, it will leave winners, losers, and a lot of people asking how they didn't see it coming. In the next section, we're starting with the epicenter of the boom, the place where the loopholes ran wild the longest. Canada, the Wild West of international education, and how, in 2025, it finally got a sheriff. Canada, the Wild West finally gets a sheriff, the 2025 cap. To understand why the international student boom is ending, you have to start with the country that pushed the model the furthest, Canada. For more than a decade, Canada wasn't just open to international students, it was addicted to them. Between 2013 and 2023, the number of international students didn't grow slowly or organically. It nearly tripled, exploding past 1 million active study permit holders. Put that number into perspective. That's more people than the entire population of San Francisco. It's dropped into a country whose housing supply barely changed since the 1990s. But the real story wasn't elite universities like Toronto or McGill. Those institutions were just the respectable front window. The real engine was hiding behind tinted glass doors in suburban strip malls. Here's how the system actually worked. Provincial governments, especially in Ontario, froze domestic tuition for political reasons. Universities were told, implicitly, figure it out yourself. So they did. Public colleges discovered a loophole. They began licensing their curriculum to private career colleges, often located in industrial parks, nail salon plazas, or above fast food restaurants in the Greater Toronto Area. On paper, the student was enrolled in a public institution. In reality, they never set foot on the main campus. These private colleges pumped out diplomas in programs like general arts, hospitality management, or business administration degrees with minimal academic value but maximum immigration value. Why? Because they came bundled with a holy grail: the Post-Graduation Work Permit, PGWP. That single document transformed education into a migration backdoor. Students didn't come for lectures. They came for legal work authorization. And once you understand that, everything else makes sense. The housing chaos, the overcrowded basements, the hot bedding reports where students rented the same bed in shifts, the food bank raids. The sudden appearance of entire neighborhoods built around one demographic. This wasn't accidental. It was a parallel economy. Landlords bought houses assuming infinite demand. Small businesses depended on student cash flow. Colleges built budgets assuming permanent growth. But there was one variable no one controlled: politics. When rents exploded in cities like Brampton, Surrey, and Mississauga, and locals started getting priced out of their own neighborhoods, the social contract cracked. By 2024, the federal government panicked. Enter the hammer. First came the 2024 cap, a brutal 35% cut in new study permits. Then came the real kill shot: the 2025 cap, cutting another 10%, dropping the target to roughly 437,000 permits. But the most important change wasn't the number. It was the attestation letter. Before, students applied directly to the federal government. Now, every province has a quota. To even submit a visa application, a student must first obtain a provincial attestation letter, pal. And guess who isn't getting them? The strip mall colleges, the private partnerships, the entire gray market ecosystem that powered the boom. They were effectively zeroed out overnight. The consequences were immediate. Major public colleges in Ontario began projecting hundreds of millions of dollars in deficits. Institutions that built their growth almost entirely on international enrollment suddenly found the tap shut off. And then came the second wave. PGWP rules changed. Graduates from many private partnership colleges. No work permit. Undergraduate students hoping to bring spouses. No open work permits. Canada didn't just tighten the system. It rewrote the incentive structure. The message was clear: we are open for master's degrees, PhDs, and high-value research. We are closed for migration by diploma. The era where a general study certificate led to permanent residency is over. What replaces it is uncertainty. And the economic fallout won't be confined to immigration offices. Strip malls will empty. Basement rentals will sit vacant. Local housing markets built on artificial demand will wobble. And Canada is just the first domino. Because once one country proves you can slam the door, others follow. In the next section, we move south where the problem wasn't strip malls, but something even stranger: coast colleges, and how Australia decided to burn them down. Coast Colalia, the UK, and the US, when the migration machine hits reverse. Once Canada proved the international student system could be throttled without immediate collapse, the rest of the Anglosphere followed fast. But each country had a different disease. And each chose a different cure. Australia, the ghost college purge. If Canada's problem was strip malls, Australia's was ghost colleges. On paper, everything looked legitimate. A student arrives on a visa tied to a respected university. Tuition paid, documents stamped, entry granted. But 3 weeks later, the student quietly transfers. Not to another university, but to a vocational education and training vet provider. These colleges often operate out of generic office buildings. Attendance is minimal. Classes are flexible or fictional. The real purpose isn't education, it's work. Students drive Ubers, work construction, run kitchens, deliver food. The college exists to keep the visa alive. A fee is paid. Attendance is marked. Everyone pretends. For years, this system quietly fueled Australia's labor market while inflating migration numbers past political tolerance. By 2023, net migration exceeded 500,000 people in a single year. That's when the government pulled the pin. In March 2024, Australia replaced its old, genuine temporary entrant rule with something far sharper: the Genuine Student (GS) test. This wasn't a form change. It was a mindset change. Visa officers were now explicitly told to ask, does this course make sense for this person's career? A 30-year-old engineer applying for a cookery certificate. Rejected. Large gaps in study history. Rejected. Suspiciously cheap programs. Rejected. Refusal rates for students from India, Nepal, and Pakistan surged, some sectors crossing 30% overnight. Then came the financial barrier. Student visa fees more than doubled from $710 to $1,600 a UD. Non-refundable, it was, functionally, a tax on hope. And finally, the cap. For 2025, Australia introduced a national planning level of roughly 270,000 student commencements with strict quotas separating universities from vocational providers. The message was blunt. Australia wants rich, elite students at top universities. It does not want gig economy labor disguised as education. The ghost colleges didn't just fade. They were erased. The United Kingdom burning the lifeboats if Australia burned the ghosts. The UK burned the lifeboats. For years, Britain had one hidden advantage in the student market: dependence. Unlike Canada or the US, the UK allowed many postgraduate students to bring spouses and children. For families from Nigeria, India, and Ghana, this turned education into a multi-year migration strategy. One partner studies, the other works. The family survives. In January 2024, that door slammed shut. The UK banned dependence for all but research-based postgraduate students. The result was immediate. Dependent visas collapsed by 85% in a single year. Then came 2025. Hopes of a policy reversal died quickly. Instead, two more blows landed. First, the graduate route the post-study work visa was cut from 24 months to 18 months. That 6-month loss often makes the difference between landing a career job and being forced to leave. Second, the proposed international student levy, a tax on the tuition universities collect from international students. Think about that. Universities already use international fees to subsidize domestic education because local tuition doesn't cover costs. Now the government wants a slice of the only revenue stream keeping many institutions alive. The consequences are grim. By the 2025-26 academic year, up to 75% of UK universities are projected to run deficits. 24 institutions are already flagged as at risk of insolvency. This isn't about Oxford or Cambridge. It's about the middle-tier universities, the ones international students actually attend. For students, the risk is no longer theoretical. Imagine paying £18,000 in tuition, and your university collapses mid-degree. That's not dystopia. That's Britain in 2025. The United States, the visa wall, then there's the United States. For a while, America benefited from everyone else's restrictions. When Canada tightened, students looked south. But in 2025, the welcome mat was replaced with a tripwire. F1 student visa rejection rates hit 41%, the highest in over a decade. For applicants from parts of Africa, denial rates climbed toward 60%. Then came the policy shock. In December 2025, the U.S. announced expanded travel restrictions, effectively Travel Ban 2.0. Nearly 40 countries faced partial or full visa suspensions, including major student-sending nations like Nigeria and Ghana. And that wasn't the end. The Department of Homeland Security proposed ending duration of status, the rule allowing students to stay as long as they study. Under the new system, visas would have fixed time limits, PhD taking 5 years, reapply mid-program. New fees, new scrutiny. New risk. At the same time, pathways like OPT and H-1B are being narrowed. The bridge from student to worker is being dismantled plank by plank. Across the Anglosphere, the message converges. We'll take your tuition, but we don't want you to stay. And that's where the real economic damage begins. Because international students were never just students. They were a stimulus package. In the next section, we'll follow the money and watch what happens when it disappears. The economic blowback. When the cash flow vanishes, here's the part governments never highlight at the podium. For the last decade, international students weren't just learners. They were liquidity. They were a shadow stimulus program, one that didn't require voters, debates, or parliamentary approval. And now that stimulus is being withdrawn. Abruptly, the silent subsidy no one talks about. Let's start with the raw numbers. In Canada, international education injected over $22 billion per year into the economy. That's more than auto parts, more than lumber, more than wheat. In Australia, Education was one of the top 3 export industries, right up there with iron ore and coal. In the UK, international student fees quietly propped up entire universities that lose money on domestic students. This money didn't just vanish into university accounts, it flowed outward. Rent, food, transit, phone plans, used cars, fast food franchises, strip malls. International students were the perfect consumer base, cash-rich at arrival, willing to overpay. Locked into a location, unable to vote, every system loves that, until it stops. The landlord reckoning. Let's talk about the suburban landlord. You know the type. Bought a modest house near a college town. Renovated the basement, sometimes legally, often not. 6 students, $500 each. Cash flow positive. A business model built entirely on volume. Now remove the volume. In places like Brampton, Surrey, Melbourne's outer suburbs, and UK university towns, vacancy rates are creeping up. Not collapsing yet, but creeping. That's how crashes begin. The slumlord millionaire model only works when demand is infinite. Once students stop arriving, beds go empty, rents soften, investors panic. And when leveraged investors panic, they don't sell slowly. They rush. This isn't just a housing story, it's a credit story. The strip mall apocalypse, then come the second-order effects. Who is keeping those strip malls alive? The $10 SIM card shops, the remittance offices, the cheap haircut places, the used Honda dealerships. International students were a captive economy. When they disappear, revenue drops 30 to 40% overnight. Small businesses don't have reserves. They close fast. Expect release. Signs to multiply, especially in cities that quietly reorganize themselves around foreign students without admitting it. The tuition time bomb. Now comes the uncomfortable truth for locals. You know why domestic tuition stayed relatively low? Because international students paid 3 to 4 times more. They subsidized everyone else. That subsidy is gone. Universities now face a binary choice. Cut programs, goodbye arts, humanities, niche research. Raise domestic tuition, politically toxic but financially inevitable. By 2027, expect serious tuition hikes in Canada and the UK. The international student boom didn't disappear. It ended its subsidy phase. Now the bill is coming due. The reverse brain drain. So where does demand go? It doesn't vanish. It reroutes. Germany is watching the Anglosphere panic, hands smiling. Public universities. Low or zero tuition. Clear work pathways. Germany needs 400,000 workers per year just to keep the lights on. Japan and South Korea are doing the unthinkable, begging foreign students to stay. Demographics leave them no choice. Then there's transnational education. Why move to London and pay $2,000 a month in rent when you can earn the same degree in Malaysia, Vietnam, or Dubai? Western universities keep the tuition. They lose the labor. Short-term win, long-term hollowing. And while the West builds walls, the East builds campuses. China, India, Southeast Asia, the monopoly on global talent is breaking, quietly, irreversibly. In the final section, we'll ask the uncomfortable question: was the international student boom ever sustainable? Or was it always a bubble disguised as policy? The end of the gold rush and the price of illusion. Every boom ends the same way. Not with a crash headline, not with a speech, but with silence. The phones stop ringing. The apartments stop filling. The cash flow quietly dries up. That is what is happening now. The international student boom didn't collapse because it was immoral. It collapsed because it became too useful. Too many systems leaned on it at the same time. Governments leaned on it to boost GDP without raising taxes. Universities leaned on it to cover structural deficits. Landlords leaned on it to justify impossible prices. Employers leaned on it for cheap, compliant labor. And students, they leaned on a promise that studying was a pathway. That sacrifice would be rewarded. That patience would turn into permanence. But here's the truth: no brochure ever admitted. The system was never designed to absorb everyone. It was designed to rotate them. The illusion of permanence. For a decade, migration and education blurred into one machine. Study gives work, permit gives residency. It looked linear, felt guaranteed. But it wasn't a ladder. It was a funnel. And funnels always narrow at the bottom. Once housing cracked, once wages stalled, once voters noticed, the funnel tightened. Not because policymakers suddenly grew cruel, but because the math stopped working. You can import people. You can import money. You cannot import space, patience, or political tolerance forever. What this moment really is, this is not the end of international education. It's the end of education as migration arbitrage. The era of generic degrees, unclear outcomes, silent policy leniency is over. What replaces it is colder, sharper, more selective. Education now follows the same logic as capital. It goes where it is wanted. It leaves where it is tolerated. And increasingly, that place is not the traditional Anglosphere. The new reality for students. For students watching this shift in real time, the rules are brutal but clear. Follow policy, not rankings. Read immigration white papers, not marketing slogans. Assume nothing is permanent. General degrees are risk assets now. Specialized skills are defensive assets. Healthcare, advanced STEM. Trades, these still open doors. Everything else is a bet, and the odds are worse than they were 5 years ago. The cost to the West, the deepest irony. By closing doors, the West may win politically, but lose economically, because talent doesn't disappear, it relocates. Once Germany, Japan, Southeast Asia, and India build self-sustaining education ecosystems, the flow doesn't come back, just like manufacturing, just like supply chains. Once dominance is gone, it rarely returns. The international student boom wasn't charity, it was leverage. And that leverage is being surrendered. Final thought, every generation believes the ladder they climbed will stay in place. History says otherwise. The student boom was a gold rush. Fast money, loose rules, moral blind spots. Now comes the correction, painful, uneven, and unforgiving to those who mistake yesterday's rules for tomorrow's. But for those who understand the shift early, there is still a way through. Just not the one on the brochure.